Hey there, and welcome to today's Explainer. We are diving headfirst into a truly fascinating 4,000-year-old security arms race. And, this isn't just about bits of metal. This is a relentless, high-stakes game of cat and mouse between the people making locks and the people trying to pick them.
Actually, right now, I want you to think about the keys you have on you. Seriously, just reach into your pocket or maybe glance over at your desk. That little flat piece of brass, it's basically a piece of ancient technology. So how on earth did a 4,000-year-old wooden puzzle evolve into the invisible digital security that's unlocking your smartphone today? Well, it's a wild journey, and we're going to figure out exactly how it happened.
Okay, let's jump right in. Here's our roadmap for today. We're going to cover 1. Ancient wood to metal. 2. Mass production in Hampshire. 3. The unpickable lock challenges. 4. The Yale pin tumbler. And 5. The electric revolution.
To really wrap our heads around the massive scale of human ingenuity here, check out this timeline. We're starting a staggering 4,000 years ago with the very first wooden pin tumblers. Then we jump across the millennia to 900 AD when English metal locks first hit the scene. Fast forward to the explosive Industrial Revolution with the Bramah safety lock in 1784. And finally, we rocket straight into the 1950s with the very first electric locks.
All right, let's start right at the beginning with Section 1, Ancient Wood to Metal, the Foundations of Security.
So it might totally surprise you, but the very first locks used by ancient Egyptians and Babylonians to protect their valuables were made entirely out of wood. And what's absolutely amazing is that this ancient pin tumbler principle is so incredibly foundational, you could literally recreate it today in a standard wood shop. Basically, you can build a functional, ancient Egyptian-style lock out of a single 2x4. You just square it up using a joiner and table saw, cut the internal center sections to make 3 moving pins, and then carve out slots for a deadbolt and a wooden key. When you slide that key in, it lifts the wooden pins just the exact right amount to free the deadbolt. I mean, it's wonderfully simple, but highly, highly effective.
Of course, wood eventually gave way to metal. By around 900 AD, English craftsmen were turning out the first metal locks. Now, at first, these were strictly for noblemen and wealthy merchants, who actually had expensive things to protect. But here is a brilliant little historical detail for you. The ancient Romans actually wore their small metal keys on their fingers like rings. Yes, it was a practical way to not lose the keys to their valuables, but it was also a massive status symbol. It literally signaled to everyone around them, hey, look at me, I have things worth locking up.
As we move forward into the Industrial Revolution, the sheer scale of lockmaking just exploded. But, as we'll see, it came with a really heavy price. That brings us to Section 2, Mass Production in Hampshire, the Human Cost.
Take a look at this. This is Willenhall in Staffordshire, England, which became the absolute beating heart of Britain's lockmaking industry. By 1855, there was something like 340 of these little backyard businesses and small workshops just churning out millions of cheap locks. We're talking orders of 10,000 locks at a time being shipped off to places like South America and India and selling for as little as a penny a pop. It was all about quantity over quality. But behind this incredible output, well, there was a very dark reality.
According to the 1843 Children's Employment Commission, and this is pretty grim, in Willenhall, children were shamefully and most cruelly beaten with a horsewhip, strap, stick, hammer handle, or whatever tool is nearest to hand. The human cost of this mass production was just horrific. Locksmiths would take on young boys as apprentices, and these kids worked grueling 14 to 16-hour days. From constantly being hunched over those workbenches, these child apprentices developed severe humped backs. In fact, these physical deformities were so widespread that the town of Willenhall earned the really tragic nickname Hampshire.
Now, while Willenhall was busy churning out millions of cheap locks, a totally different kind of battle was brewing at the high end of the market. Let's look at Section 3, the unpickable lock challenges, the innovator's duel.
So, by the late 18th and early 19th centuries, lockpicking had become surprisingly common. This sparked an intense, high-stakes duel between inventors to create the ultimate, unpickable lock. It's like a heavyweight boxing match. In one corner, we have Joseph Bramah, a prolific inventor from Yorkshire. In 1784, he patents a cylinder-based safety lock boasting, get this, 494 million possible combinations. He was so confident, he stuck a massive 200 guinea prize right in a shop window for anyone who could pick it. In the other corner, we have Jeremiah Chubb. In 1818, Chubb invents what he called the detector lock. If a lockpicker lifted any of the 4 internal levers even a fraction too high, a regulator tripped, and the lock permanently jammed until a special key reset it. It essentially told on you if you tampered with it. Chubb's lock was actually so famous that King George IV accidentally sat on one that still had the key in it, which, as you can imagine, was a bit embarrassing.
So, who won this arms race? Well, consider this number, 67. That is the number of years that Joseph Brahma's massive 200 guinea cash prize sat entirely unclaimed in his shop window. 67 years. For over 6 decades, absolutely nobody could pick his lock. But then, we get to the number 16. At the Great Exhibition of 1851, an American locksmith named Alfred Charles Hobbs finally managed to crack Brahma's lock. But let me tell you, it was not easy. It took him 16 days, working a total of a month's worth of hard labor, to finally claim that prize. And just to rub it in, Hobbs also picked the Chubb lock. It just proved that in the arms race of physical security, if you give them enough time, the lockpickers are always going to catch up.
So, how does all this build into the modern era? Let's move to Section 4, the Yale Pin Tumbler, the modern standard.
The answer to how we went from those massive, heavy Victorian locks to the super convenient ones we use today lies with Linus Yale Sr. and his son. Back in 1848, Linus Yale Sr. essentially looked back at that 4,000-year-old Egyptian wooden pin tumbler concept and modernized it. Then, his son perfected the design by introducing a much smaller, flat key with serrated edges. This was an absolute game changer. Instead of lugging around a heavy, bulky Victorian key, you could just slip this little flat brass key right into your pocket. The Yale family successfully miniaturized ancient technology and created the direct ancestor of the mechanical keys that pretty much all of us use across the globe today. But, as we all know, managing physical keys has its limits, right? They get lost, they get copied, and they are a complete nightmare for large office buildings to keep track of. So, we arrive at our final section, the electric revolution and the digital horizon. To solve the massive headaches of physical keys, we turned to electricity, and the acceleration of this tech was just staggering. We went from basic electromagnets and pin codes in 1950s military facilities to Japanese high-rises using remote controls and electromagnetic locks in the 70s. Then the 80s brought us the rise of residential auto-locking doors, and by the 2000s, the whole landscape completely exploded into the IT era. We're talking IC cards, smartphones, biometrics, and facial recognition being seamlessly integrated into our daily lives.
It's wild to contrast this massive digital evolution with a traditional bar padlock. You know, the kind exported by the thousands from those backyard workshops in Willenhall. For centuries, those served a very physical, very temporary security purpose, like locking up a cattle pen or a ship's cargo hatch. The form factor has completely changed, going from raw, heavy iron to an invisible digital cloud network. But when you think about it, the core goal remains exactly the same: safety, security, and convenience. Which brings us to the end of our explainer today. But I want to leave you with one final thought to ponder. As we rapidly replace physical pins and tumblers with facial recognition and smartphone apps, will the lock of the future even need a physical key at all? Or, by moving our security entirely into the digital realm, are we simply resetting that 4,000-year-old arms race for a brand new generation of digital lockpickers? It's definitely something to think about the next time your phone automatically unlocks your front door. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and keep learning.